Associate Professor Jamus Lim.
The bill before us is an omnibus one that includes a slate of proposed amendments associated with the 2023 budget, along with almost as many that improve tax administration and align policy objectives. The Workers' Party has already expressed its reservations with respect to several components of this year's budget, especially the continued insistence on an increase in the GST, along with our concerns over the design of working mothers' child relief, which we continue to hew to. We have also expressed our support for other elements that we believe are net positive, including tax incentives for research and development and an increase in the CPF monthly ceiling that will go toward improving the business environment while also supporting workers. In light of this, I will focus my remarks first on thoughts related to non-budget measures proposed in the bill. I will then go on to address an issue within the spirit of the bill, the use and timing of taxes for fulfilling economic objectives. I'll first offer an assessment of our current economic situation before explaining why I believe that rebating taxes in full is not only a responsible policy choice, but the only right thing to do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have two comments on the proposed non-budget amendments. Clause 23 of the bill proposes the introduction of fixed expense deduction, or FEDRs, for self-employed delivery workers. This is not necessarily a negative development, especially since a segment of delivery workers may be among the lower income segments of our society. But I wonder if these FEDRs will require these workers to claim the exemptions themselves, or if any such claims will be automatically filed by their companies when they report their employee earnings. I understand that this approach could well be unusual, but if certain delivery riders are less tech as well as tax savvy, they may be unfamiliar with the intricacies of claims for tax exemptions. I also say this because, at least based on clause 44 of the bill, the entire point of the amendments related to self-employed persons is to simplify the tax filing process, and a complicated claims procedure would surely go against that purported aim. Clause 46 of the bill further amends the interest rate peg charge on the refund of income taxes from the prime lending rate, or PLR, to the Singapore Overnight Rate Average, or SORA. This is a welcome move because, as the ministry has itself acknowledged, the relevance of the PLA has been diminished, and it makes eminent sense to tie returns to a more credible and robust measure such as SORA. Clearly, MOF recognizes the importance of ensuring that only credible interest rates are used as our benchmarks. But yet this reminds me of other increasingly obsolete rates, those for short-term fixed deposits as well as saving accounts, for which CPF and CPF ordinary account interest rates are derived. In the local context, the problem with these rates is that they have similarly become increasingly removed from the rates that banks genuinely offer to their customers. Even setting aside short-term teaser rates, the yield on the one-year Singapore government bill, about as riskless a rate as one can command, currently stands between 3.7 and 3.8%, several multiples higher than the miserly 0.7% for the major local bank average rate, and still more than a full percent higher than the CPF floor of 2.5%. Even the SORA itself has transacted at between 3.6 and 4% over the past month. My honorable friend and Sengkang colleague, Louis Chua, has repeatedly banged on this drum in the past, and I continue to bang the self-same drum, urging the government to reconsider the peg for CPF interest rates, especially that which applies to what is paid on accounts held by retirees who cannot enjoy any upward revision in their incomes to account for the higher inflation eating away at the purchasing power of their hard-earned savings. Sir, the Income Tax Amendment Bill recognizes that taxes generate powerful incentives that can shape the subsequent economic behavior of agents in the economy. This is you and I. While I agree with the thrust of the measures proposed, I would also like to put it to this House that the long-term considerations that are the preoccupation of much of the bill should also take into account shorter-term matters that concern the regular folk in our country. Indeed, coffee shop chatter often likes to speak about how this government gives out only chicken wings only to take back a whole chicken. While pithy, I do not particularly enjoy this characterization because I understand that part of the essential functions of governments include redistribution and public good provision, for which raising taxes are ultimately a part and parcel of meeting expenditure needs. So, in a sense, the government is always in the business of giving away as well as taking back chickens. But where the aphorism rings true is when there is a perceived imbalance between what taxpayers fork out and what they believe they are getting back in benefits and entitlements. To be clear, our system remains largely progressive, and so those in the lowest income undoubtedly get more than what they put into the system. But this is the case in virtually every high-income country in the world. It will be an exceedingly low bar to benchmark our expectations of government as one that does not engage in regressive taxation on net. Rather, we should ask ourselves if the government is doing enough to support the least fortunate in our midst, or if it can do more. If the squeezed middle class is receiving crucial support, especially when costs of living are rising at a rapid clip, and if Singaporean households are feeling increasingly squeezed. If society can ask those who have been the luckiest in the economic sweepstakes to give back a little bit more from the system that they have benefited so much from. Hence, it's not so much about chickens or chicken wings. It's about whether the people are getting the support today at the time when they need it, or if they are being asked to sacrifice more at the time when finances at home are already increasingly tight. So, is it a good time then to be asking for chickens, or should the government be giving out more chickens at this time? Although we managed to avoid a recession thus far, Singapore's economy remains undeniably fragile. In the second quarter, we grew by a mere 0.1%, a harrowing brush with a technical recession given the 0.4% contraction we experienced in the first quarter. Further headwinds are to be expected given the downturn in the global electronic cycle on which our manufacturing sector remains heavily dependent. The general weakness in growth is acknowledged by both the government and private sector. The Ministry of Trade and Industry downgraded its full-year GDP forecast to a range of between 0.5% and 1.5%, from 0.5% to 2.5%. The median GDP forecast among respondents to the survey of professional forecasters was just 1% in September, down from 1.4% in June. Concomitantly, the labour market also appears to be cooling, with labour demand falling for the fifth consecutive quarter, along with a dip in job vacancies. Prices are still rising faster than is comfortable. Headline inflation still clocks in at 4%, twice as high as the MAS target. Looking below the hood, inflation in key survival sectors, food, accommodation, and transport, are even higher. And the recent inflation picture has been a little flattered by collapsing energy prices. Moreover, the recent and impending price hikes on a range of things such as SNCC, electricity and gas tariffs, postage, and public transport will likely apply upward pressure on inflation going forward. Taken together, Singapore's economic situation appears fragile. We may yet avoid a recession, but are heavily dependent on international economic conditions, which are weak in both China and Europe, two key engines for global growth. In spite of this softness in the real economy, inflation, while down from the peaks of last year, cannot yet be regarded as tamed. Taken together, it's hard to fathom why we want the fiscal impulse from the government to be a further drag on the economy. Estimates are that fiscal revenues rose by 0.7% of GDP as a result of the GST hike alone. This is even before the anticipated increase by another percentage point for GST come January next year. In the context that I had previously, it is in this context that I had previously stressed the importance of rebating back as much as possible any surpluses the government will earn arising from the simple fact that tax revenue, much of which is levied in percentage terms, would almost certainly rise in absolute terms due to inflation alone. At the time, DPM Lawrence Wong stated unequivocally in a response to our claim that a surplus would likely emerge that, and I quote, "I wish that that was so, but unfortunately we do not have any surplus," end quote. Yet, in his National Day rally this year, PM Lee announced the 7 billion Majula package, which he stated would be funded from resources from this term of government. Of course, part of this would have been due from unspent expenditures accrued from careful spending, as well as additional receipts due to an unexpectedly vigorous economic activity, especially in the real estate sector. But undoubtedly, a non-trivial part of this is also the simple fact that tax receipts are elevated because inflation has become elevated, resulting in greater receipts in nominal terms. The government, in tandem with announcements over the hikes to utilities, also indicated that there will be a cost of living package to help offset the increase. To be clear, this method of effecting lump sum transfers instead of rolling out subsidies is an approach that will be recommended by most economists and is my preferred approach as well. Nevertheless, some murmurings on the ground have griped about how these packages are only one-off. And that's true, although this is based on the presumption that wages will eventually catch up, thereby making most wage-earning households whole. So far, however, wages have barely kept up. Gross salaries grew in real terms by only 0.4% last year, and in terms of basic wages, they shrank a full percentage point. And so I'll urge the government to stand ready with continued support should the erosion of take-home salaries persist. After all, a pass-through of any tax windfall should not be viewed as government largesse, but as arising from the simple arithmetic of how inflation simply bumps up the nominal price of everything, including tax revenues. Hence, rebating surpluses isn't about generosity at all, but simply a moral imperative that the government not profit from rising prices.